Welcome everyone to yet another of Netguru's live streaming sessions, separate from Disruption Talks, but just as cool. The topic of today's session is the role of low code and no code movement in future job creation. Just recently, I was watching a podcast, video cast actually. This week in startups, it was Jason Calacanis interviewing the managing partner of Sequoia Capital. And one of the topics that they were discussing was exactly no code, low code, and how that actually has allowed all of the founders to reduce the barriers of entry in terms of technology, in terms of financing. So, whilst all of that happens with regards to the creation of companies, we today will be diving into the role in the future job creation because, hey, Webflow experts are a new thing. Joining us today as the speakers is Vikas Bhagat, head of product marketing at Webflow, uh, and two of our own, Jacek Pietsch and Marcin Rzymek, no-code practice expert, and the latter is a product designer slash Webflow expert and guru. Gentlemen, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's great to be here.
Good to be here, yeah.
So let me throw this out. Treat me like a child. What exactly is low no code?
Well, let me take this one. So actually, Filip, it's not that simple. The answer is not that simple. But in general, low code and no code help building mobile and web applications without writing code, or with fewer lines of code. But there is no clear line between low code and no code. There are so many tools out there. Some of them are somewhere in between, like Webflow, which calls itself no code, but we have this custom code capabilities. So it's kind of somewhere in the middle. But what we know is that the low code movement is a growing strength, and Gartner predicts that by 2024, low code application development will be responsible for over 65% of application development activity. So
we can feel that growth already, because whatever you see on social media or anywhere on the internet is like no-code tools are growing like mushrooms, really. That might sound funny, but it is really. And that's a good thing, honestly, because companies are chasing the opportunities to launch software faster and get to the market as quick as possible.
I think what's really...
Yeah, sorry, go on.
I think what's really exciting about the kind of no-code movement and just the growth in this space is that no-code for me is it's a visual abstraction of like the tenets of software development. You think about UI, data, logic, and when you create this visual abstraction, you're opening the opportunities for so many different people to kind of access and build web apps, mobile apps, like Jacek and Martin were talking about. It creates this entire new category of job development, job creation, and I think that's what we're seeing. And the Gartner estimates that we're seeing are spot on, which is we're seeing entire companies investing in no-code and low-code tools to really decentralize who within an organization can actually build, which is really exciting to see.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely works as a major unlock from every area, from founders to people who are specializing in that, to people who perhaps don't want to specialize in that part, but they just want to get a job done. And much like Canva has been a major breakthrough, putting the power into the hands of everyday person to be able to produce, perhaps not top-notch designs, but good enough for them to go around on social media and make people believe that you actually have a graphic designer on deck, right? So that's what I really enjoy about low-code, no-code. And just for clarity, because I asked for you to treat me like a child, low-code or no-code still is code, right? It's just code that's packaged well enough, much like I remember from elementary school when we were taught HTML and there was the source vision and the visualized vision. So I'm guessing no code is basically we hand you just the access to primarily the visualized elements, the building blocks, so to say, right?
Yeah, so you have the ready interfaces. So you're generally writing code without writing code. It's like using interfaces of specific tools split by adding the content or styling the specific elements or adding functionalities and logic, just almost drag and drop elements. So
yeah, and I will emphasize one more time, Filip, that it doesn't mean that with low code you have to write a little bit of code. You have very advanced. There are very advanced low code tools on the market where you can build your web application or mobile application without writing a single line of code. Some of them have two different tools, one dedicated for citizen developers and another one dedicated for more advanced and full-time developers. So, and again, like with Webflow, even though it's technically it's a no-code tool, you still have some custom code capabilities, which are very important.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that separation. And what I really enjoyed what Vikas mentioned was that we are looking at a situation where we are allowing people to just get the job done. I will take it a notch higher. I would say that some people who you'd never consider to be people of the developmental inclination, so to say, anybody without any propensity to be an engineer, because they never got a shot because it's too complicated, right? But with this, they can still achieve that minus the burden of having to know this. And sometimes from someone who can't code, we might still get a piece of super creative, super efficient software just because they were sort of the gap was bridged between the knowledge that they were lacking, but the tools to still bring that to life. So Vikas, I got to ask you, what people are expecting with no-code tools and Webflow's roadmap, because that's where you come from Webflow, right? So
yeah,
you can tell us.
It's a great question. And I think what we're seeing from a lot of our users today and kind of customers is they're expecting to see even more superpowers when it comes to being able to build more advanced, more complex, more differentiated experiences using no-code tools, right? And one of the biggest trends that we're seeing with no-code tools and kind of what I expect to see in the future when you look at other companies in this space is collaborative workflows, right? It's not just about a designer sitting in Webflow by himself or herself. They're actually working with other teammates on the development side, maybe on the marketing team, et cetera. How do you bring all those people into one single platform to have that collaborative back and forth? And so when we think about our Webflow roadmap, what we're really thinking about is like, how do we simplify those workflows? How do we provide the designers, the developers, these people that are building visually more superpowers to actually build really complex web apps or mobile apps, but then also really focus on this element of like collaboration, right? How do you bring in the right developers, the right marketing teams to provide comments, feedback, et cetera? Everything with no code. And I think the value prop that we really see here is speed to market. How quickly can you build something, iterate on it, get feedback on it? That's the power of no-code tools. We are really investing from a Webflow roadmap perspective on that element, which is how do we make it faster for people to build on Webflow and collaborate with their peers in a really efficient and systematic way.
Okay. Gentlemen, anything to add on top?
That's awesome. How to make speed.
I think Vikas just gave us a sneak peek of what's coming next in Webflow.
It's like no-code tools already shorten up the communication flow because you don't need to contact so many people or do those big handovers to development teams. And if we want to shorten even more, that's fantastic, really.
Yeah, and what we're really thinking about too, from like a roadmap perspective, is think about just scalability and performance. When we think about our CMS, for example, we really need to be able to make that a really powerful solution for our users. And so we are really thinking about kind of performance grade CMS scalability. We're thinking about just reliability of the websites that folks can create using Webflow, the infrastructure that we're investing in. But what I'm really, really excited about, and we talked about this at No Code Conference last year when we kind of previewed memberships and Logic, is how do we come back to this aspect of the visual abstraction of the three pillars of software development, right? We're continuing to invest in the UI layer, but we have to open up the data and the logic side of things too. So we're giving folks more control, more keys to the kingdom, if you will, to build more complex things and connect with business logic and other systems. I can't share too much on this live stream, but I'm really, really excited about some of the things that are coming down this summer and this fall. That's all I can say for now.
We can wait to see.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, sounds exciting.
I mean, but you heard it here first, basically, right?
That's right. That's right.
But and to build on top of that, what I am really enjoying, I remember my first interaction with Webflow at Netguru when I think it was 1.5 years back or something like that, and it was the typical case: the customer needed a quick landing page, and of course the old way, right? So we need to arrange a project manager. There has to be a front-end engineer. And I remember then when someone, I think, was just spearheading that initiative internally at Netguru of no-code, low-code, being the evangelist of such an approach, and how much better it was for everyone involved, because instead of decreasing the client's budget on achieving the same goal with the team that I mentioned, we were able to do that faster, redirect the same budget to much more efficient things, and for the third, last but not least thing, we were able to maintain this sort of editability for the customer. Like I said,
That's
treating
important.
like a child. I know that there is the correct word for what I just said, but by editability, I mean the fact that we didn't need to re-engage the original team, but much rather we had a shared understanding and access. And if there was some line that had to be changed on the landing page, it needn't have to be a message to the team. Then someone would have to jump back into this. It was much faster, much more efficient with money, and less sort of talent heavy, which made it better for everyone involved, because we could simply apply that same front-end engineer in a place where they were much more needed and just get it done with Webflow, because that's what we did it with. So
Philip, you know much more than you think, you know.
I mean, I'm a curious child. But listen, I made this story with a purpose, because I mentioned the story with a purpose. The purpose is that I want to lead it to a question. This was 1.5 years ago. Let's jump in a time machine. We're in 2027. What's the competitive landscape like then? Is anybody even making any landing pages or anything like that in regular code, or is no code eating the world?
It's a good question.
Of course.
It's a great. I think from my perspective, the competitive market is accelerating. I mean, I see new no code landing page creating tools every single day, right? Like we see new companies getting funded every single day. And what I think about is, there's always going to be this need for kind of custom code and code enabled tools. But I do think there's going to be a world where organizations, large Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 100 companies, smaller organizations are all going to rely on that speed to market, which is how quickly can you get a landing page up? How quickly can you build a differentiated site? And the most efficient way to do that is with these no-code tools. And I think the goal is there's never going to be a clear winner in the competitive market. I think the market is way too large. There's going to be a lot of different tools you can use. The goal is going to be around kind of like the interoperability between those tools, right? When we think about the connection points between Figma and Webflow, for example, is a great example of this, which is like, how can you shorten that development timeline? That's really where the competitive market is going to go from a trend perspective. I do think in 5 years from now, like the predominant way that people are going to be building landing pages, even more complex websites, client profile pages, etc., is going to be through no-code tools. The question is, I don't think there's going to be a clear winner, but that's actually a good thing for the end user or for the organization. Increased competition is going to lead to a lot more just better outcomes and better product development for customers, which is a great thing for the entire market.
Okay.
True. Everything is moving forward. Remember that, because it's like the no-code tools are moving forward and adding new capabilities and so on. But the devices which are serving the applications and websites, those are evolving as well. Look, we have already those flip phones, and nobody knows what's going to happen soon.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that my childlike curiosity leads me to is to thinking at some point Elon Musk is going to stop buying Twitter and he's going to give us Neuralink, right? And when he gives us Neuralink, you won't even have to code. You'll just have to think about Webflow to bring you that website. So that's my prediction for in 5 years' time. But coming back to Planet Earth, is no code really for everyone? Do you think that I could pick up Webflow and bam out a landing page? Is it that simple?
Sure.
Well, honestly, I think we should look at it from perspective of a developer and a company.
Yeah, there are
because,
two perspectives.
Yeah, for developers, I would say there is so many different tools that I think that there is something for citizen developers as well, for more with professionals with different mindset when they have this engineering way of thinking. But it really depends on the platform, I would say. There are platforms where you can master within a couple of weeks or a few months, maybe. But there are platforms which are much more complex and more comprehensive at the same time. And it can take, the learning curve is more shallow, and you progress gradually, and you need a lot more time to really become an expert.
True, agree. There are like two sides of this medal. So it is for some people easy to get that knowledge, obtain that knowledge. Like Jacek says, the learning process is really short, and it's easier to digest the information when you see it visually instead of learning lines of code, because it takes time really to master the engineering. But on the other hand, yeah, look, me as an example, I'm a product designer. So when I saw code some time ago, I was like, no, that's not for me. And now I'm building websites in Webflow easily, and I learned that really quickly. I know a lot of folks who did the same. So yeah, Filip,
Okay.
you gotta try.
If I remember correctly from the several very modest interactions I had with Webflow, actually, it did remind me of Figma, or in general with the layered approach, right? Because like when you mentioned that you're a product designer by heart, you didn't like seeing code, but essentially when someone serves you the same logic of operation, you can simply follow it, right? You don't need
Exactly, because a lot of people see visually and digest things visually. So when I see that one panel is responsible for content, second panel is responsible for styling, instead of writing the separate files and connecting those, it is really easy. Yeah.
That's
and
actually
then you have even that feeling that you add some soul to that design itself, because it starts getting functional.
Okay. Yeah, Vikas.
It's interesting you bring that up. I'm in a very similar way in terms of just like learning. When I actually started learning code back in college, and I never really kind of stuck with it. It was really, really challenging for me to kind of work through that perspective. I got introduced to Webflow over a year ago. It's like, okay, this actually makes more sense. Like logically, I can see everything. I can visually build and learn. And the power of Webflow is that it's writing clean code on the back end. So you're actually kind of learning both sides of the coin, which is like you can build visually, you can learn visually. And I will say, like, no code is for everybody from like a user-based perspective, but it does require a specific kind of mindset, right? It requires an intellectual curiosity, childlike curiosity, if you will, to really like lean in to understanding how to think about like basic elements of web development, for example. I think it's helpful. It doesn't mean you can you can start from scratch, but there is this element of intellectual curiosity and kind of learning the basic tenets of web development is always really helpful with a tool like Webflow. And what I think is really, really powerful is live streams like this, right? It's learning from the community. It's learning from people who've gone through this process, who've gone through this evolution, and relying on the community to kind of get better and learn it and kind of help go up that steep learning curve. Because there's a learning curve with every single no-code tool out there. It's really relying on those resources, which is critical.
It makes sense. I mean, it's pretty much that. You can never blame it on the tool that you weren't able to arrive at the desired result. If you had zero interaction with anything to do with websites or with product design, the logic behind that, even not knowledge, but just mere familiarity, there's no tool on earth that's going to do the job for you, right? That's the moment where you simply say, hands up, I'm useless, I gotta pay somebody to do it. But I mean, it's pretty much like with anything that requires rhythm, dance, singing, even horse riding. If you are not a person who has a sense of rhythm, none of those things, no matter how good the horse, how great the microphone, the teacher, and everybody else involved, you need to come prepared and you need to bring something to the table, right? So that speaks to the specific mindset, requires learning and commitment. Do you have some other examples of such things that might come out of the box not for everyone?
I think mindset is the biggest, and secondary, you need to have some basic knowledge. Maybe not information about how to write a code and the syntax of the code, but at least which elements are responsible for what. In my environment, which I work in, meaning Webflow and web development, is like you need to understand like CSS is responsible for styling and the elements are connected with each other. If you will just go with the flow and don't know those, yeah, you can build some things, but if you will add additional pages or additional functionality, at some point you might screw up something that you just built a minute before.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think it's super important to remember about best practices, even when you use no-code or low-code tool. Because I've seen a lot of situations where something was built by citizen developers by some internal so-called expert in certain platform, and it was a huge mess, and it was hard to maintenance. And I would say that from day one, you should build your no-code or low-code solution with best practices in mind. And there is a lot of sources you can learn from. And you should take advantage of this knowledge definitely from the very beginning. Otherwise, we will end up with some huge mess.
I believe we don't want to discourage anybody for trying, because you might want to build a small website for mom and pop's shop, and that would be enough. You don't need to dig deeper into learning code. But if you want to scale up and add new functionalities or add custom solutions to this, you need to have some knowledge sooner or later.
what you mentioned, especially when you mentioned CSS, my mind went to a time where Vikas, apologies, competitor names dropping, but I use Squarespace. I'm sorry, I used Squarespace to build a website a couple of years back, and I remember that when I tried to do some CSS, it all went haywire. I just had to revert. But I get your point. It can't be too simple, because if it becomes too simple, then at whatever scale there is going to be with the website that you're working on, you're just going to have coding errors, I believe, right? If you don't deliver the basal complexity that is required by the code, then on scale, it's just going to become problematic. And now, Vikas, I got a question to you, because perhaps this is a misconception in my head that you can clear up. And Jacek, Marcin, of course, I'm keen to hear from you. But later, Vikas goes first. I want to hear, how wrong am I thinking that Webflow is more for citizens, more for startups, scale-ups? Webflow and enterprise, is that a thing? Am I just not seeing that? Are you embedded so well that it's just like great visual effects in the cinema? If they're there, I just don't see them, right? So is that the case?
I think what we've seen over the evolution of Webflow over the past couple of years is, like, we started off as a lot of citizen users, a lot of just freelancers starting to really use Webflow and build amazing websites for their end customers and clients. We've seen a huge increase in enterprise adoption of Webflow, and working with agencies specifically and experts specifically to help build really differentiated web experiences, really complex websites, going through really large rebranding. And what we've seen really is those enterprise organizations opening up their doors to really kind of capture the value of that speed of development, right? So we've seen a lot of is enterprise organizations and financial services, for example, is a great industry and sector that we're really seeing a significant amount of adoption of folks who are like, well, we are moving really quickly. We need to differentiate our brand. We need to be competitive against other folks that are coming into our space. How can we build the best front door to our organization? That's the company website. And a lot of large enterprise organizations are really realizing that. We've signed on customers from Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 500 organizations globally that are really relying on no-code tools like Webflow to be able to kind of create that differentiated experience. Because again, they're realizing, for us to stay competitive, for us to draw as many customers as possible to the front door of our organization, we need to have a really dynamic, really versatile website. And that's really where it starts. I think we're really starting to see that adoption. I'm excited to kind of see the future of Webflow from that regard, because when we start to see kind of these large dominoes fall in financial services and healthcare and even government, like industries that are a little bit slower to adopt more like emerging software tools, we're actually starting to see that kind of start first with Webflow, which is super exciting, because as they're realizing, if we can figure out the security and compliance perspective, we are able to really land and expand across some of these really large industries and large sectors on the enterprise side.
Okay. The Netguru boys, anything to add?
I think we see this very often with in our business. And I want to add one more thing on top of that, because I look at it from the perspective of low-code tools, so not Webflow specifically. And I have to say that currently on the market, there is a no-code or low-code tool for every type of and every size of the business, no matter if it's a startup or a big enterprise. And with no-code tools or low-code tools, advanced low-code tools, you can actually implement any type of business logic you want. Really, sky's the limit. You can, as a last resort, you can use custom code. If you hit the wall with low-code or no-code, you can throw a bunch of code into it and take your solution to a different level. So it's really, I think it's much more powerful than many companies currently is thinking about it. So yeah,
true. And the good thing is, like, you can also after we prepare the product or website, you can hand it over to other departments, and you don't have to be scared that somebody will break something. It's like, okay, marketing team is taking over the content. Okay, just this is our product. You can just fill in the new content every some time, and it will be okay. You don't need to still rely on the developers and then do this back and forth communication.
Okay, so when I asked you initially, I want to ask the same question, just much more specific. And this time, give me the truth, not nice words telling me that I can do it myself. So what actually, boots on the ground, is required if I want to start and further extend the functionalities of no-code tools? Like, you told me about the mindset, but that's the answer for basically every question when anybody wants to learn something, right? So give me the nitty-gritty. If I want to, what are the foundations without which I basically won't be able to move, or if I move, I'll do more damage than good?
Hard to define one answer.
I think you need
it's like collection of factors, honestly.
A computer and access to the internet.
Yeah, an open mind. That's it.
Really,
and a colleagues
an open
around
mind,
you,
and yeah,
and somebody
then read a lot, watch YouTube tutorials, and go visit the Webflow University, and really you can learn a lot from it in a matter of maybe a couple of weeks.
Okay, no, listen, once again, you're giving me the feel-good answer. I'm looking for, Philip, you need to know HTML, or you need to know HTML and CSS, things like that, right?
So at some point, it might be necessary to really dig into JavaScript, for example, which Marcin, as a designer, did with a pretty good result, I would say. So at some point, you might need to master basic of jQuery, for example, to be able
to add extra functionality.
Yeah, add extra
functionality. Do you mean like, start creating something, or you add some extra functionalities and custom solutions?
Okay, I mean, well, there's two parts to this question, right? One, what is required to start and to extend the knowledge. So when you're giving me jQuery or Java, I feel like we're in this latter part of this question with extension of knowledge, right?
I can share my experience with you if you like. It's like at the high level, you need to learn, like I said, what type of language is responsible for which elements. This is the top. And like I said, you don't have to dig deeper, but just, open some documentation or watch crash courses on YouTube, HTML, CSS. It will take an hour, and you will understand, like, okay, those elements are responsible for this. Those things are connected with something else. And this is a starting point. And the rest of the things you can learn on the fly, because you will just drop some elements, just try something out. Then you will do some changes, and you will do it automatically because everything is rendering on your screen. So there's not like pitfall whenever you write some code, you just release it, and then something happens, you don't know what. With the no-code tools, you generally see, because even when you hover on some elements, something is happening, something is changing on the screen. So it is really, really easy. You can even open, video on left side and your project on right side, and then just start copying the tutorials. This is the easiest way to learn.
Okay.
An analogy I like to use a lot when it comes about like starting to learn, let's use Webflow as an example, or even evolving it, it's like a language. It's a new language, right? Sure. So when you're learning a brand new language, you're trying to construct a basic sentence from the get-go. What is the noun? What is the verb? How do they connect to one another? And I think that's what Marcin and Jacek are talking about, which is, what are the connected points between the elements or the basic elements of building a website, right? You don't necessarily need to dive into the actual code itself, but as you start to build visually, you can build more and more complex sentences and start to learn that language over time by just trial and error, by iterating, by kind of watching, YouTube videos, etc. But what's interesting about no-code tools itself and just building visually is that you're actually kind of learning this language as you continue to kind of build and stress test. I do think there's always going to be a need for custom code. Like, one of the things I see with Webflow quite a bit is folks are relying on custom code and learning like CSS and HTML, jQuery, etc., to extend the functionality, to extend the capabilities of what this website can functionally do over time. And then when I think about Webflow's product roadmap, coming back to your original question, is like, how do we continue to visually abstract some of those custom things that are being done, so you no longer have to use custom code? You can actually do it visually. And like, that's really what we're focused on. And when I focus on creative superpowers, that's really what we're trying to do. So I love this analogy of like learning a new language, but you're learning it through like the basic elements of just how do you create a basic sentence. And then over time, you evolve that into a much more kind of complex statement. That's how I think about the evolution of learning Webflow and no code in general.
And whenever you hear, or if somebody will try to teach you something, whatever you hear, you see the same things in the no-code tools. If somebody will tell you add a heading here or there, you will see heading, or you will see the blog called heading. You're not gonna, think about how it is called in this language, or what is the short, abbreviation of heading in HTML. You don't have to think about it.
Okay,
that's true. But one more thing, if you allow me, Filip. On the other hand, you have to be very careful with adding more and more features into your no-code platform. I think because you understand the problem that you grow the complexity of the solution, and since it's a no-code, it should be very user-friendly and easy to master. So it's about finding the right balance between complexity and easy of use.
And the time when you want to launch something, because then you got to test some things as well. Yeah,
It's always about
change your
trade-offs.
seat and sit as a user. Yeah.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's like this element of this concept of trade-offs, essentially, which is like you have to find that right balance. Otherwise, you're going to kind of get in this mix of going down the wrong path and creating this thing that is just not sustainable in the long term. It's just going to kind of fall flat, basically.
So if the Netguru boys are to be trusted with their answer just a second ago, and I will build on your analogy, because basically I don't need to know any code to get started, but pretty soon I will have to know some code if I want to do anything, above the basic level. And just like with language, even before I get to the nouns and the verbs and even to the good morning in the language, if I want to buy something at the shop, I just point, right? So I can get my way around the shop. I can look at the amount of money I have to pay on the little screen. But if I'll be wanting to find something in the store, I need to query for something specific, and I need to know even just the basics for that single noun. So that's what I'm hearing from you. But because I also want to ask you, you mentioned the aspect of community, that what we're doing here is part of creating more and more materials that are basically encouraging people to get going with this. Webflow University, can you shine some light on that, and what are the other surrounding activities from Webflow concerning building that community?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I joined Webflow about a year ago, and I had no idea how strong the community around Webflow and no code and visual development really was until I started at Webflow. I'd heard about it in like a vacuum. And when I think about that, a lot of that is focused on Webflow University. And our Webflow University team is really focused on creating educational content that is helping people learn the basics of building in Webflow all the way to much more advanced lessons and advanced concepts when it comes to building for the web. And I'm excited because Webflow University is going to continue to get a lot more funding, grow quite a bit from a team personnel standpoint to create more and more content to help anybody, whether they're just getting started with Webflow or have been using Webflow for 6+ years, to get better and better at Webflow, right? The close partnership my team has with them on the product marketing side with Webflow University is whenever we launch a brand new feature, we need to have an educational tutorial video and documentation ready to go. And what's exciting about that is it's not just Webflow University that is teaching Webflow to the world out there. It's actually folks within the community. It's folks that are really raising their hand, becoming experts, like all of you on this call, really sharing their experiences with building on Webflow, the challenges that they've had, the pitfalls that they've run into, and the workarounds, right? Like if the customer's asking for, or a client's asking for a specific type of thing and you're getting stuck, you can easily go to the forums, you can go to the YouTube pages, you can watch YouTube videos to really learn from people that have gone through that exact same conversation, that exact same process. And I think that's what makes the community really special. And what we're trying to do at Webflow is continue to invest back into the community. And I think about a month ago, we launched a community grants program with a $10 million fund to really help drive more education, more content, more meetups, more conversation within the community around Webflow. We are laser focused on bringing the best kind of community members together to kind of share that knowledge with one another. And I'm really excited about kind of where we're headed with that program and what we're doing with that entire ecosystem. We have such great folks that are doing live streams almost every week, weekly live streams on Webflow, weekly live streams on visual development. I joined one yesterday from FinSuite, for example, and from Keith and the team. And it's just great to hear people sharing their experiences about Webflow and where we're headed. I think that element of teaching and coaching allows anybody really to kind of start from scratch, and you can kind of slowly learn the Webflow over time from that perspective.
When you mentioned that, I just remembered that following that story that I shared with you about one of the first, or maybe the first uses of Webflow commercially at Netguru, I also remember that what followed almost immediately was a channel on Slack, #Webflow. And as you imagine, there was one person who was advocating and evangelizing here and there about that and how they used it and what they were able to achieve. And not so long after that channel was birthed, we actually saw more and more people joining. And what happened next? There was somebody pioneering the initiative of, hey guys, I'll do a workshop for you. I'll show you what I know, and then you can ask me questions, and then we can evaluate how good we are, and maybe we can develop that capacity internally. So yeah, this is what I really also like about this, that it allows sort of bottom up initiatives at companies, big and small, to just get it going, because you don't need to hugely invest. You don't need to go for years and years in education. You can simply show proof of work and hey, let's go, just like it worked here at Netguru. So with this example of the story that I mentioned to you, the front-end engineer was rendered unnecessary because we had the Webflow designer. And let's throw the obvious question here. Are we going to replace engineers? Are engineers going to lose their jobs? Is Marcin going to be using his product design knowledge and no low-code tools and basically cornering the market? Or should engineers be afraid, basically?
Filip, honestly, the no-code tools aren't building the logic itself. This is only the tool. So it's the same like with the design even. Yeah, you can learn the tools, but if you don't know the principles of design, yeah, something might go off. So the same in here, in my opinion. It's like people, especially engineers, they provide that core, that logic, and they can, the no-code tools are taking the most boring, let's say, or the easiest task off of their shoulders, so they can focus on more difficult things. So yeah, this is my answer for that.
Yeah, I fully agree with Marcin. I think that
Finally.
low code and no code will bring a different set of challenges to professional programmers, and will help them focus on more, let's say, creative work, whatever that means in programming.
Yeah, I think I would agree. This was 3 yeses across the board, which is pretty incredible for a live stream like this. There's like 2 macro trends that I see within large organizations, right? And we've got customers or examples of this, like Shift.com, for example, is an enterprise customer of Webflow, where their actual engineering team is the one that brought in Webflow into the organization. Why? Because they wanted their engineers, their CTO wanted their engineers to focus on higher priority initiatives within the organization versus relying on engineers to make small updates to a specific landing page, right? This element of decentralizing the workload within large organizations is happening naturally across companies of all sizes. And the reason for that is because we're just seeing a much faster emphasis on business activity and getting products to market, getting features to market, and kind of having business acceleration. And so with that increased business acceleration, to Martin and Jacek's point, engineers, developers are really focused on these like really massive initiatives within these organizations. These are priority 0 initiatives. Why not let your marketing team, why not let your design team kind of work together with a tool that is secure, that is compliant, that is safe, that is fast to focus on your website so that your engineers can focus on other priorities. What's really exciting for me is like, it's less about engineers losing their job. It's actually more about engineers shifting their focus and their energy and finding this collaborative partnership with designers and with marketers. One of the most exciting things for me to see, and especially with just job applications and resumes and job postings, we're actually starting to see people look for Webflow developers and Webflow designers in job descriptions, right? Which is it's actually creating these jobs, and it's still keeping and allowing those engineers to focus on the most mission critical items for their business.
And engineers might also focus on, figuring out new solutions. They don't have to still, repeat the same actions and do the same things that everybody know, like, build layouts of the applications or something like that. But they might start thinking about creating something new.
Yeah, because currently front-end developers are responsible for much more than just building this visible layer. There's pretty much, there's very complex logic behind what we see when we use modern web applications. This is very complex. You have to manage a lot of data and a lot of business logic to really achieve that quality that we see with modern software as a service applications.
So this comparison that comes to my mind is essentially low code and no code is like a meta approach of a developer using open source, all pre-prepared libraries, right? Because you're just doing that, but at scale. You're automating your work to make sure that the tasks that really don't need your per each character stroke attention can be delivered just in the automated way. And what I'm hearing about the collaboration between product designers and developers taking some of the grunt work, the unnecessarily dirty work right now, so to say, of the hands of the developers, we're basically growing the pie. Nobody's going to lose their jobs. There's going to be more work that's getting done more efficiently and in a better fashion, and people will feel like they're utilizing their time actually better. So a collective sigh of relief from all developers watching this and listening to the podcast later.
I feel, look, it's like now almost every business has some kind of software. So there's like more requirements, more need for software. So it's like,
Yeah, the talent gap is enormous currently. So
Okay. So, Marcin, you mentioned that you as a product designer can be taken as an example working as a Webflow developer. Can you give us some real life examples of how no-code tools simplified your work? I don't mean specifically, in this project I did this, that, that. Just give me the value delivered that without the no-code tool would have taken you longer, or you tell me.
yeah, I can say I can share some experiences. It's like the good thing is like even before I joined Netguru, I was able to create the website and develop and deploy it on my own for my own business, which was good. I didn't have to rely on somebody else or didn't have to learn normal some sort of development on my own. So this is one thing. And secondly, is like I'm taking the responsibility for the full projects, so I can be from the start to the project till the end. So it's not like I'm designing some interface and then hand it over and then forget about it. But I'm just adding functionality. I'm staying in the contact with the client. If we need to add something, I can then jump back and forth, add some new layouts or something like this, design something, and then add functionality to that, test it, stay in contact with the users as well, check the analytics, and you are like expanding your capabilities and options, and you even feel more like needed for some projects or some clients as well.
yeah, and guys, I don't know how many of you are aware that to build web and mobile application, for example, you need like 6 different roles. You need front-end developer, back-end developer, mobile developer, DevOps probably, project manager, and quality assurance. So 6 different roles, and it takes a lot of time to communicate, and it takes a lot of time to actually deliver something. But with low-code tool, you can have one expert, and you can build mobile and web application, and you can not only build it, but you can deploy it with a single click, like in Webflow. So it's
there are less misunderstandings. There's one brain or less brains at least, so you don't have to explain your thinking. It's like sometimes you just watch, or I look at my own designs and I just know what I got to do. Otherwise, you would have to translate that to the developer, maybe answer information why here or why there. If they suggest some changes, you might disagree with that and so on. And then, yeah, look, I can deliver full projects and I understand myself, I hope.
Okay, I mean, listen, tinfoil hat on time. All of this sounds way too good to be true. You're telling me I don't need 6 people, I just need one, right? And they don't need to have the 6 collective brains, I just need the one.
Actually, Filip, you need 3. You still need quality assurance and project manager, but for much short time, obviously, because the project is much.
My tinfoil hat remains on. I see what you're trying to do. You won't convince me, but try. You can't be that good. Challenges.
Okay, you have to pay for the license.
No code. Just like, what are the challenges and risks? In all seriousness, jokes aside, related to no code, other than the one that I stumbled upon at the beginning of this conversation. So it can't be too simple, and at scale, you sort of need to understand the ramifications. But what are the things that are not perhaps the cons or disadvantages, but things that have to be taken into consideration, especially at the beginning, right? So, Vikas.
I think for me, let's take it from like a company's perspective, right? It's a lot of it is organizational design. It's a mindset, but it's also organizational design. To Jacek's point, having an org structure, a team structure where you have that kind of operational rigor around like who's working on what the accountability looks like, what the collaboration workflows look like, is really important, because you're investing in a tool. You're not investing in a cultural like mindset shift. You're investing in a tool. So if you don't take into consideration kind of how the team is structured, who's working on what that collaboration looks like between your internal stakeholders or even the experts that you work with outside, that can lead to a lot of challenges. It can lead to a lot of just concerns and just projects falling flat. And if I kind of step outside of that and focus more on the technology side of things, whenever you're investing in a no-code or low-code tool, you need to think about kind of compliance, scalability, performance, et cetera. Like that is incredibly important. And one of the things that we're starting to see is like there's, again, the market is growing really, really quickly, but not all of these tools are what I call enterprise grade. They're like ready to go and be used and be trusted by these larger enterprise organizations. I used the example of financial services earlier as a growing industry and sector for Webflow specifically. we need to be compliant. We need to have data protection. We need to have all those things ready in place so we can actually be used within those organizations. I think that's a really important area for folks to focus in on when thinking about kind of investing in these no-code tools.
You need to understand the goal which you try to achieve, and you need to be sure that you understand what kind of software or what application you try to build, and choose the right tool. This is really
it's
important.
A key point,
so the discovery needs to be really top-notch in here.
Or you have to bet on the platform which has this custom code capability. I keep saying that when you're looking for a low-code, no-code tool, check the community as the first step. Then check whether you have this option for custom code, because I've seen a lot of projects which failed miserably because of lack of this capability. And once you hit the wall, you're done, and you can only throw away what you've built and start from scratch. And when you have this custom code, you can always go around any obstacle. And
sometimes it's hard to find all the limitations of the tool, because you need to dig deeper and generally ask the community sometimes.
And you cannot anticipate all the requirements that may come up later.
So basically what you're telling me, in order to choose the right platform, pricing, but that's with everything, right? Sort of talent availability and demand, whether that can be fulfilled, the role of the community to lean on whenever someone is just getting started or stumbling upon a problem, the flexibility, and especially with regards to exporting your data. So Vikas, I apologize if this is a question that's a slight curveball, but what about vendor lock-in, right? I remember once, I think we were changing on one project between Zeppelin and Figma, and I remember that it wasn't just a click, right? So what are your observations when it comes to your customers and companies, enterprise, or whatever the size is, with the expectation towards, hey, I might need to migrate, perhaps not the entire library, but just a specific project? Is vendor lock-in an issue?
I mean, vendor lock-in is always going to be considered an issue potentially, but I do think it's important for these tools to be able to allow people to export out certain things when needed, right? When a migration does take place. I just think the way that these projects are being done today, these aren't 2-year lifecycle projects anymore. These are 6-month projects, etc. And so the speed of development, the speed of the work that these projects need to get finished on, I don't see vendor lock-in being as much of an issue as it once was, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. But I do think it's something that's important to think about when you're evaluating various tools. I don't know if Marcin or Jacek have additional points there, but
actually, I like to redirect this question when it come up from the client side. Why do you think we need to migrate in the first place? Because there is very little. Actually, I don't know any tool which is capable of doing this. Like, you can build your application, for example, a website, I don't know, maybe in Node.js or in Python, and migrate to Java, or use any off-the-shelf CMS system, and with one click migrate your theme to different solution. It's not possible, actually. So most of the time, it's clients are looking for the answer because they're afraid that maybe the cost will go up in like 2-3 times maybe, or that they will hit the wall. So this is why I'm keep telling them that they should look for platforms which has this custom code capabilities. And when it comes to cost decreasing, I would say that it's very rarely the case that successful software as a service provider increases price, and it affects existing clients, existing users. So I would say that this risk is very unlikely to materialize in a reasonable time span, because we shouldn't be looking at what will happen 4 or 5 years from now, because we are here now, and we're looking for the most optimal and cost-effective way to solve the problem for maybe this year, maybe next year, but not 5 years from now.
Okay.
Let me be a good cop in here, because that's not always a bad thing, because most of the no-code tools, because you are staying with there for longer, they provide you with security. You don't have to take care about the things. Take as an example Webflow. You don't have to think about hosting and rest. You just have everything in one package. So this is a good thing, especially for small companies, but for the bigger ones as well. You have everything in one dashboard. Let's say you can create different projects and have different websites and have everything under the one roof, which is a good thing.
Okay, I mean, I think you're making a very convincing case that as much as vendor lock-in always is portrayed just the connotation of this phrase as something negative. Hey, if the vendor is amazing, I want to be locked in, right? I have
Yeah,
zero.
everybody's looking for limits. Yeah, if you
Exactly.
give me limits, it's a bad thing. But yeah, just think positive and check what you get first. Later, just
Yeah,
see
I
what might be a
completely
problem.
see that. So we have 10 minutes left, just being the time police here for the sake of making sure that we cover some of those last questions. Uh, Tell me this. So you mentioned that you are a product designer who picked up no code and went along the way. Now I'm curious about this. If you weren't a product designer, would you be able to develop a career based on low code or no code? Does it exist always as something supplementary or as a complement to your existing skill set? Or are you able to build a business, an agency, a career based on low code or no code tools?
You can base a business based on no code local
I
tools. There are
think
a lot of
we are a great
freelancers.
example
Yeah, true. Both of us.
of that it's possible. And to be honest, low code and no code have been paying my bills for over a decade now. Really, I'm working with low code and no code over almost 12 years now. So definitely can build a business. You can build, you can become a freelancer, or you can build a business.
There's no answer here. It's like either you can expand your skills and grow the services you provide, let's say, or either you can focus on mastering one thing.
Yeah.
Vikas already said like there's like plenty of needs for no code positions. Just check LinkedIn or something. When you write no code or Webflow or specific tools, even you can see it like really quickly.
And the marketplace for low code, no code add-ons libraries, is growing rapidly as well.
Yeah, it's not just the building software itself. It's like adding some functionality to something as well, or even connecting some tools.
Okay, so if I'm getting that right, Jacek, you mentioned that there's the capability for people to simply like develop an add-on, a mod from the gaming world, if you will,
Exactly.
DLC basically for you to sell your idea for an add-on on this. Am I getting this right?
Exactly, and yeah, we've seen. Yeah, we have. I think we have a few examples of it related to Webflow. I don't want to give a particular name of the solution, but there's.
Look what FinSpeed is doing, for example. Vikas already mentioned, guys. They're doing an amazing job. They, as far as I know, they provide Webflow services. I mean, building the website, but now they have a huge community, and they're building on top of capabilities that Webflow right now provides with their attributes, or they even created a framework which is helping people to learn the tool itself and add something on top of that. So there are a lot of companies like that.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing across the board when it comes to folks building businesses on Webflow is like exactly that point, which is like you can create a niche. We have a lot of folks that are freelancers that are focusing on building websites just for nonprofit organizations on their spare time. They have a full-time job, but they're just doing this for certain types of organizations. And you've got folks that are kind of completely shifting gears and making millions of dollars a year, or hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, building their business on top of Webflow or other no-code tools. And that's what's really exciting about the evolution of the community, which is like you can learn from wherever people are on their evolution or their maturation with Webflow or any other tool, and figure out where exactly you want to be. And I think that's what's really, really exciting about like the competitive market and the market ahead, which is if folks are really building these businesses on Webflow, they're going to continue to add back into the community. They're going to give feedback to the products itself, and the products are going to get better and better and better. And like that, for me, from a Webflow perspective, as somebody on product marketing, when I see people making, I mean, I can't share the exact number, but the amount of money that we've paid out for people that are selling templates on Webflow is astounding. It is astounding to see how well people and successful people are becoming just by building templates for websites and sharing that on our marketplace, right? And for me, it's a highly sustainable career, right? I think it's something that people can explore and continue to get better at. And I don't expect that to slow down anytime soon in the future.
And that only proves how easy it is to get there, honestly.
Yeah.
Easy, but not easy. But it's like, yeah.
And because, sorry for saying this, but this is only a tool for web development, what we are discussing here. But imagine what are the needs for, in platforms where bigger platforms, local platforms, where you build mobile and web applications.
Exactly.
Like full-fledged.
There are hundreds of tools for almost every need.
I actually picked up on what you proposed, that I go on LinkedIn. I went, chose worldwide,
I
put
knew
it
that.
code,
I'm gonna
and
do this.
22,500 results. And it's it's much further than you told me, because we're not looking at positions that are looking specifically for that skill. Just off the top of my search query, a managing consultant for Deutsche Post and DHL, a managing consultant with low code capabilities.
Yeah, look at that.
We have a sales development representative in the San Francisco Bay Area with a requirement to know low code tools. We have a lead generation specialist. We have a creative venture architect, a senior project manager, a whole bunch of perhaps not specifically just engineering jobs or engineering surrounding jobs, because I personally would be surprised to find a low code or no code expectation for a sales representative or a managing consultant for a career company, right? So definitely worth checking out. And I am scared, quote unquote, that this will become a skill that's not a nicety, but a skill that's something that's required, just like companies were initially jumping on the bandwagon of hey, we're healthy, we're eco, greenwashing, this and that. 2022, if you don't have actual initiatives that are not greenwashing, that are sustainable for the environment, you are losing your competitive advantage. And what I'm seeing here, just from the search, at some point, if you don't have a basic even understanding, you might have a tougher job finding a job in sales.
Yeah, Philip, look, it's like with knowledge how to use a computer.
Yeah.
Go a lot of step back, years back. Yeah. For now, if somebody doesn't know how to, use computer, I don't want to offend anybody, but it's a requirement right now. Doesn't matter what you do.
It's like Microsoft Office 20 years ago, no code.
Yeah. That's an excellent analogy. I mean, what we right now consider as everybody is willing to put Microsoft Office package knowledge in their CV, and when you throw some Excel problem at them, they blush. Pretty much, this is what I'm going to expect from Webflow or low code, no code to appear in the CVs, and hopefully with a higher degree of actual skills than what people put in terms of Microsoft Office. So just to wrap up, because we are 2.5 minutes away from the full hour, I'd just like to conclude and give it back to you. What I learned from you over this hour is the problems that low code and no code are not trying to solve, they are solving them, is first of all, talent shortage. So unlocking the ability for someone to be delegated to another job, and low code, no code capability simply being available to someone with a lower barrier of entry to that. We're looking at perhaps this might be a stretch, but I can imagine that if I am a front-end engineer and I'm looking to develop myself, and I'm being sent or deployed to do a landing page after landing page after landing page, I might be adding to the turnover rate, because at some point I'm just going to say, hey, listen, I mean, I was hoping to learn and develop and get my seniority higher, and here I'm doing things that a low-code, no-code expert could do, right? So
Exactly.
that also speaks to speed, because I imagine that with Webflow, it's 20 times at least easier and faster for someone to get a landing page going than it is for the team that you mentioned, Jacek, the six brains team needed to launch a simple website. But also, even when we step not outside of the workforce, but before we enter the workforce, so before someone even becomes of age, they might already be releasing their creativity and unleashing their skills in Webflow, just as a human, as a person, because someone might be interested but might be slightly scared to code, not their cup of tea. But hey, with this, I can get going, I can get more encouraged, and even before I even think of getting a job or using this for commercial reasons per se, this might just be the thing for me. And basically adjusting tools to process, not the other way around. So I believe that's like a umbrella covering all of the things that I've mentioned. So how good of a student am I, and what have I missed? Nothing? I don't believe you.
You gotta repeat the question, Philip, because
Sorry?
you gotta repeat the question if you don't mind.
No. Sorry, I thought you heard me, and I didn't hear your question, so we got into this loop. No, I was just saying, how good of a student am I? Because I just tried to repeat to you what I learned as a no code, low code expert, basically at the beginning of this call before I started learning from you, gents. So, is there anything that you'd like to add on top of this couple bullet point conclusion that I mentioned, or does that cover the topic?
Honestly, the list might go on, I think, but those are the crucial ones, and I think we should focus on those. And you are the great listener, by the way.
I've got a pencil, I can write. I got 2 years. I'm fully equipped for this, right? Okay, so I'm curious to hear if anybody has any closing remarks. Vikas, maybe you'd like to share anything, redirect people to Google something. We can drop anything in the comments, anything latest for Webflow that people should have a look at.
Yeah. First of all, really enjoyed this conversation. I think you covered it exceptionally well at the conclusion point. From a grade perspective, I'll give you like a solid A, which is great, for an hour-long conversation. So good job. When I think about just like closing thoughts, with Webflow specifically, I highly encourage our audience members and listeners to check out Webflow University. We're continuing to launch new educational videos almost daily now. We're going to be sharing out a roadmap in the next couple of weeks as well, too. So if folks want to get a deeper dive in terms of what features and functionality we're investing in, expect to see that out in the next couple of weeks. I will say we have a conversation with our CEO in end of April timeframe. So if folks want to join that live stream in a couple of weeks, we'll have a chance to connect and speak directly with Vlad, our co-founder and our CEO.
That sounds like much bigger of an opportunity than I imagined you're going to tell us. So the production team is going to drop this in the comments and also in the description of the podcast on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. You're going to be able to have some links to what Vikas just mentioned. So in the meantime, gentlemen, thank you so much. And I'll be grabbing the phone and calling my parents. They won't ever believe me. I got an A, so I got to tell them.
Or tell them that you're planning to start no code career.
They won't believe that either. They don't believe much. Anyway, thank you, everybody. And dear audience, thank you for attending, and see you either on the next Disruption Talks or the next live streaming session, just like this one. Thanks for coming. See you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Take care.